In 2022, the International Council of Museums defined a museum as a not-for-profit, permanent institution in the service of society that researches, collects, conserves, interprets, and exhibits tangible and intangible heritage. Open to the public, accessible, and inclusive, museums foster diversity and sustainability. They operate and communicate ethically, professionally, and with the participation of communities, offering varied experiences for education, enjoyment, reflection, and knowledge sharing. Knowing what a museum is, it's also important to know there are also many kinds of museums, such as art museums, history museums, geology and archaeology museums, children's museums, military museums, science museums, and so many more. Another type of museum that has been on the rise since the early 2000s is the pop-up museum. Pop-up museums are made to last for short periods of time and appear in places where traditional museums might not be found, such as shopping malls, ballrooms, open community spaces, and convention centers. In many cases, pop-up museums rely on visitors to provide the objects on display and a description of their significance, with the museum organizer only providing the theme and maybe the infrastructure for the items to be displayed. Pop-up museums have also recently gained the name of Instagram museums since they are designed to come and go in a fairly short period of time. Pop-up museums can last from a few hours to a few days to a few months, depending on the location and the circumstances surrounding their purpose or audience. This week, a pop-up museum known as the Goodman Edson Observatory, or GEO, reappeared at the 2024 National Order of the Arrow Conference being held at the University of Colorado in Boulder, Colorado. We'll learn more about this important pop-up museum and how it all comes together in this edition of Artifact of the Week. For many involved in scouting, mentioning the Goodman Edson Observatory, or GEO, doesn't mean a whole lot. They don't know what it is or why it's important. Part of this is because the name can maybe be seen as a little bit ambiguous, and for many, it's because they've never attended a NOAC. So earlier this week, I traveled from Philmont to Boulder, Colorado to attend NOAC 2024 and learn more about the Goodman Edson Observatory, or GEO. To help explain what the GEO is and how it got its start, I interviewed Bradley Taylor, the OA's adult advisor for the GEO. Tell me a little bit about the history of this exhibit. How did this all come together for NOAC in general?
As part of the NOAC program, have always tried to infuse over the last probably 3 to 4 decades our history and preservation efforts, right? We are called in our order's obligation to preserve and observe the traditions of the Order of the Arrow, and so we wanted to do that. And for several decades, it was called the NOAC Center for History and Preservation. I'm a historian, so I love it, but to some of our younger population, it's a little dry. It used to be tabletop exhibits. So in 2012, we decided to create what we call the modern era of the NOAC Museum. And so first of all, it was a name change, and we call it the Goodman Edson Observatory, or the GEO. And so that is paying honor back to our order's co-founders, E. Erner Goodman and Carol A. Edson. But also, we took it from a tabletop display to a vertical display, as you can see. And it really makes it look like a professional quality museum, and everybody's able to see instead of having to hover over some tables.
So tell me a little bit about the history of how we got from 2012 to 2024.
So we are a key part of the program, and here lately we've been also very excited to be a cross-trading post. But what we do is it takes several months to come up with these plans, and it requires site visits, it requires a lot of understanding of what we want to exhibit, what the story is going to be, and in doing so, we have done everything from about, this one's a 5,000 square foot museum. Our largest ever was in 2015 for the Order of the Arrow Centennial, and we had 15,000 square feet. We try to incorporate real artifacts, big graphics, story, physical art. We also want to create those immersive experiences. So you'll see films, you'll see other things that kind of put you in that time and place, because we want it to not just be what's on the panel, but how it makes you feel.
You mentioned a team that puts this together. Tell me about that team.
We have a 44-member staff this particular NOAC, and I really think about our staff in 3 phases. There's the team that's honestly been working probably for the last 10 or 12 months. It's a small nucleus that they've been doing this for a while. They've got a great skill set. We know the history of the order. We know all of the design elements, and that team just gels. I mean, we meet weekly, if not more than that. Then you really have what I call the build out or infrastructure team. And that's when our staff gets here on site and we take a ballroom and turn it into this. It takes us about 3.5 days. And then really it's the last group, and that's just staffing the GEO throughout conference. And so we allow our staff to have some time to enjoy conference. So this group is actually going to be working 3 half days, and they'll have 3 half days off. But then we supplement our staff, and this time we brought it back called our GEO docents. So they're really our ambassadors, our volunteer staff. We only were looking for 90. We had over 230 participants in NOAC want to volunteer with us for a 2-hour shift, and about 180 of them are actually going to be serving 2-hour shifts over the next 3 days. And so we couldn't do it without all these help.
You're the adult advisor for this, so you have a youth chairman. Tell me a little bit about your youth chairman and how he got that job.
Karsten Smith's phenomenal. He's our GEO chair this time. And, you know, when I think about my own experience in 2012 being the youth chair, it's just one of those things where it's a whirlwind. You don't always know what's going on, but you know, as an Order of the Arrow is youth-led and adult-advised, it's great for us to have Karsten. He was actually on our staff 2 years ago at the 2022 NOAC at UT Knoxville, and he was just an eager beaver, really. You know, he was just always wanting to be on shift, give tours. Fun story about it, I actually went up to Karsten, got a phone call, and I heard that the Lieutenant Governor for the state of Tennessee was actually going to be visiting and needed a tour. So I walked up to Karsten, who was really a rock star staff member, and said, "Would you like to do this?" And he said, "I'm going to need a few minutes to prepare." He went, you know, kind of collected himself, got his thoughts together, and did a truly phenomenal job. So it was about a week after conference. He called me up and he said, "Bradley, I know this is early, but I want to be the chairman the next time if that's possible. I really want to do that." And he's been really a rock star for us. For me, I always look at our youth chair to give some inspiration, to give some vision, but he's really the leader of our staff, right? He's trying to energize them and keep them motivated throughout the week, and he's doing a great job so far.
Since Bradley mentioned the youth chairman of the GEO, I took some time to talk with Karsten Smith to get his take on being the chair and what he has learned from this experience.
Last NOAC, I was a staff here. Back in 2018, I was actually a docent. I fell in love with what the GEO is. Teaching history to a bunch of people of all different ages is something I'm really interested in. My home lodge, and be able to do that on a national scale is it's so fun. I stuck by the GEO advisor last time, always asking to what can I help with, how can I learn. And I guess made a good impression. So I was really fortunate enough to be asked to be the GEO chair this year, and it's been an absolute blast from start to finish.
So what's the biggest thing you've learned in that role as the GEO chair?
The biggest thing is no matter how much detail we go into planning is that it will always change. We planned out every single panel here, you know, exactly what the text is going to be. We spent hours on Zoom with that, but we had to change a few things at the end of the day, and just being okay with it, being fluid, is the biggest thing that I learned.
To wrap up my time with Bradley and Karsten, I asked each of them to give me their top 3 must-see items at this year's GEO.
3 must-sees. Number 1 is going to be the Billy Clark story with the bedpan. Being one of the first places where Goodman got inspiration from for our organization is just, it's such a cool story about how a scout had gotten a not so great situation, ended up making the best of it and laughing about it at the end. I think it is really great. Second one is the Emerson James Vigil Sash and Vest. Being that he's the first African-American Vigil honor member in our organization, I think is huge, showing how from the very early ages of our organization that we were really, really diverse. So it's really important to me that we kind of display that kind of history. Then number 3, the CAG memorabilia stuff. It was the ceremony advisor group. So back in the 70s, some lodges weren't doing ceremonies the best. So this group formed out of some of the first long mats. So really bringing it back to what the induction's really about and really doing the ceremonies right. I think those are some super cool stuff.
I have my favorites, but I think for this particular GEO, you know, I love for everybody to be able to get a glimpse into truly our founders, right? Being able to see true artifacts from Dr. E. Erner Goodman or Carol Edson. So we've got a few really great pieces of theirs, like Goodman's professional tunic that actually has a Red National Committee sash from the 40s when the National Committee was first formed. And it wasn't meant to be an elitist or a differentiator, but it truly was meant to say, hey, The people in the red sash are the ones you can ask questions. It's a friendly face. And so I like to be able to tell that story as well. Second to that, the Order of the Arrow has 5 original paintings by Joseph Satari, and we actually have those paintings on display here at the GEO. And I love to be able to see what inspiration goes into these paintings and how that tells our story. And then last and certainly not least, is I like an immersive experience. And so the Order of the Arrow's National Ceremonial Grounds is at the Summit Bechtel Reserve in West Virginia, and it's called the Summit Circle. And so the last part of our GEO exhibition, after we transition out of our youth leadership area, you actually get to immersively walk through the Summit Circle. It's going to be a reproduction of the gateway, the podium, the fire lay, and we actually, for the first time ever, are going to be showcasing the film from the dedication night. Which is going to be really exciting. You can stand there and kind of get goosebumps.
To be completely transparent, this was the first time I've experienced the GEO as well. So I had no preconceived notions of what it would look like, but based on my knowledge of the people involved in planning and executing the exhibit, I did expect it to be very professionally presented, well researched, and something which shouldn't be missed by NOAC participants. To that end, I was not disappointed, but in fact impressed by how the story of the OA is told as you walk through the space and take in everything presented. For me, a couple of the highlights were how the volunteer docents were used to help facilitate the visitor's experience, and on Monday only, the presence of Billy Clark's daughter to help tell her father's story. But that'll have to wait until next time as we continue to learn more about the history of Scouting America through the collection of the National Scouting Museum and Artifact of the Week.